In 1978, China was poorer than Kenya. Just a few decades later, it's a global superpower, rivaling the United States. How did a nation of farmers turn into the world's factory, and then into a tech titan? This is the untold story of China's jaw-dropping rise from poverty to power. And trust me, you won't believe what it cost. Hello, and welcome back to our channel. From failed revolutions to trillion-dollar trade deals, we're breaking down the real playbook behind China's economic miracle. Stay locked in, because the next few minutes will change how you see the world. China's rise from one of the poorest nations in the world to the second-largest economy globally is a remarkable story of transformation that spans several decades. It involves complex factors, including economic reforms, political changes, global integration, and an enormous shift in industrialization. Here's a detailed breakdown of how China managed to grow into the world's second richest country. 1. The early years, 1949 to 1978, struggling after the revolution. Post-revolution challenges. When the People's Republic of China, PRC, was established in 1949, the country was economically devastated after decades of war, including the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 to 1945, and the Chinese Civil War, 1945 to 1949. The economy was agrarian, and much of the population lived in poverty. Soviet-style planning. From 1949, the Chinese government, under Chairman Mao Zedong, implemented Soviet-style centralized, command-based economic planning. Land reforms were initiated, collectivization took place, and state-owned enterprises, SOEs, were created to control industrial output. While these policies were aimed at modernizing the country, they also led to poor productivity, famine, and economic stagnation. The Great Leap Forward, 1958–1962. In an attempt to rapidly industrialize and collectivize agriculture, China undertook the Great Leap Forward, which led to widespread famine and the death of an estimated 20 to 30 million people. The policy was a disastrous failure, and it severely hindered the country's economic growth. Cultural Revolution, 1966–1976. This was another period of chaos in China, during which Mao sought to purge capitalist, traditional, and cultural elements from Chinese society. It further disrupted education, industry, and agriculture, severely affecting the country's human capital and economic development. 2. The shift toward reform and opening up, 1978–1990s. Deng Xiaoping's reforms, 1978. After Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping emerged as the paramount leader of China. Deng's reforms, beginning in 1978, were the turning point in China's economic transformation. He recognized that China's survival depended on economic modernization and shifting from a centrally planned economy to a more market-oriented approach. The B2. Reform and opening up policies. The core of Deng's reforms was the Reform and Opening Up program, which had two key components: economic liberalization. Agricultural reforms were first implemented, allowing farmers to sell surplus crops in the open market. This household responsibility system led to a dramatic increase in agricultural productivity. Rural incomes surged, and the living standard improved. Special Economic Zones, SEZs. China opened up specific regions to foreign investment, starting with cities like Shenzhen near Hong Kong. These special economic zones became testing grounds for market-oriented economic policies, attracting foreign capital and technology. Decentralization. Local governments were given more control over their economies, which helped create competition and incentivized local growth. China's focus on pragmatism rather than ideology helped foster rapid economic growth. State-owned enterprise reform. While many state-owned enterprises remained, reforms allowed them more autonomy, including being able to enter global markets and even raise funds in international financial markets. Rapid growth in manufacturing and exports. These reforms gradually transformed China into a world factory. The economy boomed, particularly through the manufacturing and export sectors. By the 1990s, China had become the workshop of the world and started integrating more deeply into global markets. 3. The role of globalization and WTO membership, 2001. China's entry into the World Trade Organization, WTO. One of the most significant events in China's rise was its accession to the WTO in 2001. Membership allowed China to access global markets, attract foreign investment, and align its economy with international trade norms. This led to rapid growth in China's export sector. Foreign direct investment, FDI. As China opened its doors to foreign businesses, multinational companies poured billions into the country. The nation became a manufacturing powerhouse, especially in electronics, textiles, and machinery. The low cost of labor and favorable government policies made China an attractive place for global capital. Infrastructure development. China's rapid industrialization was accompanied by massive investments in infrastructure, highways, high-speed rail networks, ports, airports, and energy production. These infrastructural advancements improved domestic productivity and facilitated greater global trade. 4. Continued growth and urbanization, 2000s-2010s. Urbanization. The 2000s and 2010s witnessed a massive migration from rural to urban areas. By 2020, over 60% of China's population lived in cities. This shift created huge demand for housing, infrastructure, services, and consumer goods, which spurred further economic development. Shift toward a consumer economy. As China's economy grew, the government began focusing on transforming the country from an export-driven model to one that also included significant domestic consumption. Rising wages, an expanding middle class, and urbanization fueled a growing demand for goods and services, from electronics to luxury items. Innovation and technology. By the 2010s, China began to heavily invest in technology and innovation. Companies like Huawei, Alibaba, and Tencent emerged as global leaders in telecommunications, e-commerce, and tech services. China became a leader in mobile payments, artificial intelligence, and other cutting-edge technologies. Made in China, 2025. The Chinese government launched this ambitious initiative to advance the country's technological and industrial sectors to the global forefront, emphasizing high-tech industries like robotics, green energy, and biotechnology. Rising middle class. As wages rose and social mobility increased, a large middle class emerged, propelling demand for both domestic and foreign products. This demographic shift contributed significantly to the country's GDP growth. 5. Becoming the second-largest economy, 2010's present. Economic size and global influence. By 2010, China surpassed Japan to become the second-largest economy in the world by nominal GDP after the United States. By purchasing power parity, PPP, China became the largest economy globally. Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. In the 2010s, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, a massive global infrastructure project to connect Asia, Africa, and Europe through trade and investment. This initiative aimed to expand China's economic influence and solidify its role as a key player in the global economy. Global Manufacturing Hub. China continues to dominate global manufacturing, from electronics to consumer goods. Its immense labor force and efficient supply chains give it an unparalleled advantage in production. Financial power. China has also been making strides in international finance, with the renminbi, RMB, becoming increasingly important in global trade and finance. The country has invested heavily in global assets, including in Africa, Latin America, and Europe. 6. Challenges and future prospects. Despite its successes, China faces significant challenges, such as aging population. The one-child policy, 1979 to 2015, has led to an aging population, which could slow economic growth in the coming decades as the labor force shrinks. Environmental issues. Rapid industrialization has led to serious environmental pollution and resource depletion, which China needs to address for sustainable long-term growth. Trade tensions. Trade wars, particularly with the United States, have led to increased tariffs and uncertainty in the global trade system, which could impact China's export-driven economy. Rising debt. China's rapid infrastructure development and urbanization have come with a heavy reliance on debt, both at the government and corporate levels. This raises concerns about the sustainability of growth. Despite these challenges, China's journey from one of the poorest nations to the second-largest economy in the world has been driven by its ability to adapt to changing global conditions, its embrace of pragmatic reforms, and its integration into the global economy. As of today, China remains a dominant economic force, and it continues to shape global markets and geopolitics. Let's dive even deeper into the factors and milestones that contributed to China's rise from a poor agrarian society to the world's second-largest economy. Below is a more detailed breakdown of key periods and elements that contributed to this transformation. 1. The early period, 1949 to 1978. Post-revolutionary struggles, post-war poverty, and political instability, war legacy. By the time the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949 under Mao Zedong, China was devastated by decades of conflict. The country was war-torn from the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937–1945, and the Chinese Civil War, 1945–1949. The economy was disorganized, with widespread poverty and devastation in both rural and urban areas. Centralized command economy. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, implemented a Soviet-style planned economy, nationalizing most industries and collectivizing agriculture. This economic model focused on central control, large-scale industrial projects, and state ownership of production. Economic disasters. The Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution. Great Leap Forward, 1958–1962. Aiming to rapidly industrialize and collectivize agriculture, Mao introduced this policy to modernize the country, but it led to disaster. The centralization of agricultural control led to widespread famine, exacerbating poverty and killing millions. Estimates range from 15 million to 45 million. The country's GDP growth contracted severely during this period, and it deepened China's economic problems. Cultural Revolution, 1966–1976. Mao's radical attempt to maintain ideological purity through purging capitalist and traditional elements of Chinese society led to the destruction of cultural heritage, education, and critical infrastructure. The economy suffered from the political turmoil and the disruption of education, business, and industrial output. 2. Deng Xiaoping and economic reforms, 1978–1990s. Deng Xiaoping's rise and pragmatic leadership, Deng's ascendancy. After Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping became the de facto leader of China by 1978. Deng rejected Mao's ideological rigidity in favor of pragmatic economic reforms. While he maintained the CCP's political control, he understood that China's future depended on economic modernization. Reform and opening up, 1978. Deng's policies were built around the idea of economic pragmatism, famously encapsulated in his phrase, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." Deng realized China had to modernize its economy, which meant embracing aspects of market economics while maintaining a centralized political system. Agricultural reforms. The household responsibility system. Agricultural reforms. One of the first economic changes was the household responsibility system. In the past, agriculture had been collectivized, but under this system, farmers were allowed to keep the profits from the sale of crops after fulfilling state quotas. This reform led to an explosion in agricultural productivity, reduced famine, and boosted rural incomes. Increased output. The success of these reforms allowed China's rural economy to recover and grow rapidly. By the 1980s, China had a surplus of food production, and rural incomes were rising, which improved living standards for millions. Special Economic Zones, SEZs, and market liberalization, Shenzhen, and the first SEZs. In 1980, China established its first special economic zones, SEZs, in coastal cities like Shenzhen. These zones were crucial for attracting foreign direct investment, FDI, with favorable policies such as tax breaks, less state control, and more liberalized markets. Shenzhen, originally a small fishing village, grew into a major metropolis in just a few decades, symbolizing China's transition to a market economy. Foreign direct investment. SEZs attracted large amounts of foreign investment, particularly from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan. This allowed China to tap into global capital, technology, and managerial expertise, propelling its industrialization, manufacturing, and export growth. By the mid-1980s, China was emerging as the workshop of the world. Its low labor costs and rapidly expanding infrastructure made it an attractive destination for international companies looking to outsource manufacturing. 3. Global integration, WTO membership and export boom, 2001-2010s, WTO accession, 2001. China joins the World Trade Organization. In 2001, China formally joined the World Trade Organization, WTO, marking a watershed moment in its economic history. This opened up China's economy to greater global trade and allowed it to participate in the global economic system in ways it had never done before. Trade and investment boom. WTO membership led to a surge in China's exports and imports. It gave China the opportunity to integrate into the global supply chain. From being a low-end manufacturer, China quickly moved up the value chain to produce higher-end products like electronics, automobiles, and machinery. Export-led growth manufacturing powerhouse. China's manufacturing base exploded, and it became the largest exporter in the world by 2009. It exported goods ranging from textiles to electronics, building an economic model heavily reliant on exports, trade surplus, and foreign exchange reserves. By 2005, China was running a massive trade surplus. It became the world's largest holder of foreign exchange reserves, mainly in US dollars. This provided China with immense financial stability and political leverage in global markets. Labor-intensive industry to high-tech manufacturing. Over the years, China shifted from being a low-cost labor provider to a leader in high-tech industries, such as electronics, telecommunications, and heavy machinery. Chinese companies like Huawei, Lenovo, and ZTE gained global recognition. 4. Infrastructure, urbanization, and consumption. 2000s, 2010s, massive infrastructure investment. The infrastructure revolution. China invested heavily in infrastructure, including roads, railways, ports, and energy. This made domestic trade faster, cheaper, and more efficient. By the 2010s, China had the world's longest high-speed rail network and some of the busiest ports in the world. Urbanization. Rapid urbanization transformed China's rural landscape. Cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, and Chengdu became global hubs for business, technology, and culture. By 2020, more than 60% of China's population lived in urban areas, compared to just 20% in the 1970s. Rise of the consumer economy, growing middle class. By the 2000s, China's growing middle class, numbering in the hundreds of millions, began driving domestic consumption. The demand for consumer goods, housing, automobiles, and luxury products skyrocketed. Real estate boom. A huge real estate boom also took place, leading to massive construction of residential and commercial buildings. This real estate expansion created jobs and wealth, further bolstering the economy. E-commerce boom. Companies like Alibaba and JD.com transformed China into the world's largest e-commerce market. The use of mobile payments, via companies like Alipay and WeChat Pay, also revolutionized the way Chinese people interacted with money and commerce. 5. Technological innovation and global ambitions, 2010s present. Made in China, 2025. Industrial upgrading. In 2015, China launched the Made in China 2025 initiative, aimed at moving away from labor-intensive manufacturing to high-tech, high-value industries. Key sectors like artificial intelligence, robotics, 5G telecommunications, and green energy became focal points for investment and development. China as a tech powerhouse. China has become a leader in fields like 5G technology, with Huawei leading the charge, artificial intelligence, with companies like Baidu and Tencent, and electric vehicles, with companies like BYD and NIO. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, geopolitical ambitions. The Belt and Road Initiative, launched in 2013, aims to expand China's influence globally through investments in infrastructure, trade, and development projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe. It is one of China's most ambitious geopolitical and economic projects, aiming to secure markets, resources, and political influence in the developing world. China's global financial footprint. China also increased its financial influence, establishing institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, to fund global development projects, thus promoting the international use of the Chinese renminbi, RMB. 6. Present and future challenges. Aging population. The one-child policy, which lasted from 1979 to 2015, has resulted in a rapidly aging population. The shrinking workforce poses long-term risks to economic growth. Debt and real estate crisis. The rapid accumulation of debt, especially in local governments and real estate developers, has led to economic imbalances. The recent Evergrande real estate crisis is a stark reminder of the risks involved in China's rapid growth. Environmental challenges. China faces severe environmental challenges, including air pollution, water scarcity, and ecological degradation. The government has committed. Let's delve even further into specific economic strategies, institutional frameworks, and global shifts that have facilitated China's rise from poverty to the second-largest economy in the world. We'll also discuss in more detail some of the geopolitical, social, and technological factors that contributed to this remarkable growth. 1. Deepening reform and transition to a market economy. 1978-1990s, Deng Xiaoping's policy shifts. Deng's practical vision. One of the key features of Deng's economic reforms was his departure from strict Marxist-Leninist orthodoxy. Deng believed that economic progress could not be achieved through rigid ideologies, but through pragmatic, trial-and-error policies. The key was to prioritize economic modernization, even at the expense of certain socialist principles. Dual-track approach. Under Deng, China implemented a dual-track system in which the planned economy continued in certain sectors, while other sectors were liberalized and open to the market. This approach allowed China to gradually transition from central planning to a more market-oriented economy, without the abrupt disruption that might have occurred in a full-scale transition. State-owned enterprises, SOEs, reform decentralization of economic control. While state-owned enterprises, SOEs, remained dominant, the government allowed them more autonomy to compete and operate in market conditions. The government encouraged SOEs to adopt profit incentives, allowing them to operate with a degree of market freedom. Many of these SOEs were later restructured into joint ventures, privatized, or allowed to enter the stock market. Privatization of agriculture. Along with agricultural reforms, the government allowed private ownership of land use rights, although the land itself remained state-owned. The agricultural reforms allowed farmers to grow crops on land that they leased from the state, selling surplus products at market prices. This gave rise to a more entrepreneurial rural economy, benefiting millions of people. Opening up to foreign capital. Foreign direct investment, FDI. The Chinese government introduced incentives to attract foreign investment, including favorable tax policies, land leases, and lower production costs due to China's abundant, cheap labor force. This brought in technology transfer, foreign management techniques, and international business practices. Export-oriented growth. The influx of foreign capital also helped China develop a strong export sector. Foreign businesses set up manufacturing plants in China, producing goods not only for China's domestic market but also for global markets. This created a robust industrial base and helped build China's position as a major exporter. 2. China's integration into global trade, 2001-2010s, WTO membership and globalization. China's WTO membership, 2001, joining the World Trade Organization, WTO, in 2001 was a pivotal moment. The country had to adopt international standards for trade, investment, and dispute resolution. By entering the WTO, China gained access to the global marketplace on a much larger scale, significantly boosting its exports and attracting more foreign investment. Trade surplus. With the trade liberalization following WTO accession, China began to run massive trade surpluses, especially with the United States, the European Union, and neighboring countries in Asia. This trade surplus was largely driven by China's position as the world's low-cost manufacturing hub. Development of global supply chains. As China became integrated into global trade networks, it became an essential node in global supply chains. International corporations set up manufacturing plants in China, drawn by low labor costs, favorable policies, and good infrastructure. Companies such as Apple, Nike, and General Motors set up production lines in China, contributing to its status as the world's factory. China's export strategy. Manufacturing boom. In the 2000s, China became the world's largest manufacturer. Key sectors like textiles, machinery, electronics, and automotive grew exponentially. The country's large and cheap labor force, combined with massive infrastructure development, made China the dominant player in global manufacturing. Focus on infrastructure. The government invested heavily in building world-class infrastructure, roads, ports, airports, railroads, which supported both domestic economic activity and global exports. Major ports like Shanghai and Shenzhen became global hubs, facilitating the flow of goods in and out of China, from the ashes of poverty to the heights of prosperity. China's journey proves that with vision, resilience, and relentless determination, anything is possible. What once seemed impossible became inevitable. The story of China's rise isn't just a story about a country. It's a reminder to the world. No dream is too big, and no obstacle is too great. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through history. If you found this story inspiring, smash that like button, share it with dreamers around the world, And don't forget to subscribe for more eye-opening stories from across the globe. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and never stop building the future you deserve. From famine to fortune, from forgotten to formidable. China's rise wasn't just an economic miracle. It was a masterclass in ambition, strategy, and relentless adaptation. But here's the real question. What comes next? Will China continue to soar, or is a new chapter just beginning? Hit that subscribe button, because in our next video, we're diving into the challenges that could shape China's future and change the world as we know it. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Tech innovations, geopolitical shifts, futuristic cities. Kindly like, share, and subscribe. The rise was just the beginning. 33